This area of the world was late to the game of civilizations. While most of the world was pyramids and empire, this place was empty apart from a few seals, but not for long. Around 1,000 years ago, humans moved in. The island was settled from both ends by Arctic and European people, but apart from a bit of good old-fashioned Christian evangelism, the two groups weren't really on speaking terms. The Norse rejected the Inuit ways of living, instead depending on their imported ways of farming, ivory and deforestation, so when they were failed by the climate, the land and the markets, rest in peace Greenland 1.0. 300 years later, the Scandinavians had dropped the Pope and they'd become all Protestant. Then they remembered all those converts that they'd left up in the Arctic, and maybe, horror of horrors, they might still be Catholic. It wasn't long before they returned, and this new colonialism had a distinctly Danish flavour. This time they started to merge and mix, sharing language, religion and genes, all under control of Danish, and named it all Greenland. But from the very first day they returned, Greenland gave them nothing. While other countries had empires with plantations and diamond mines, squeezing even the bare minimum of ambergris and bauxite from the biggest island on Earth meant enduring decades of smallpox, scurvy and being Danish. But they kept on because empire? The fact that very few people lived there was the problem. Claiming that land was easy, enforcing that claim was hard. Denmark sold their only other New World possession in exchange for the US backing off. Suddenly, World War II. Nazis. Copenhagen gets occupied, so the land has no leadership. But don't worry, here's the USA to save the day by occupying the land and selling all those natural resources to themselves. Also to fight that war against the Germans, but before that, where's the mine? Despite this, Greenland was secretly invaded by Nazis. Twice. Then World War II ended and knock knock, who's that? It's decolonisation. And America wants to buy Greenland again. Denmark turned them down again. And then finally Greenland was thrown a bone. From being first 2 colonies, then 1 colony, then a county, Greenland emerged into the mid-20th century as a fully integrated part of Denmark. But things were about to get complicated, as they always do, with the Europe. Like any self-respecting colonised people, Greenlanders were heavily dependent on a small number of resources, such as halibut, haddock and prawns, commonly known as fish, which stands for flip, I'm so hungry, exactly what Greenlanders said when Denmark, against Greenlandic wishes, joined the European community, and by doing so, agreed to open exclusive fishing zones to competition, and to limit their overall catch. When you actually drill down into the details, it doesn't really read that bad. The highest subsidies in Europe were given to improve Greenland's agriculture and fishing, and competition was relatively tiny. However, the fact remains, Greenland wasn't happy. To leave, Greenland drew up a hasty 12-year plan, and the line at the end of that road meant leaving Denmark. Sort of. The main obstacle being that the land is massive and there's just about no one living there. A country that looks like this is impossible to control or defend alone. Remember, secretly invaded by Nazis twice. The eventual compromise between the ideal and the pragmatic solutions was the start of an empire of asterisks. When they voted to leave the treaties of the community, they adopted the status of an overseas territory, voluntarily adopting the rules and position of a colonial possession. A move with no real precedent. While every other overseas territory wants to shed that membership in one way or another, Greenland dives headfirst towards it. After Home Rule, Greenland really crystallised as a nation. Aside from the flag, they also received an anthem, a standardised language, and became a separate statistical area. The government got the power to make its own laws, and then in 2009 they increased control of police, coast guard and courts to enforce those laws. Since 2009, Denmark now takes care of very few things. Chief among them, international relations, subsidies and military. Copenhagen represents Greenland at the UN. However, according to the Self-Rule Acts, Greenland can act on behalf of the realm in all matters regarding solely Greenland. And they've done this many times. Recently, Denmark and Russia made agreements on catch quotas and ocean access, but it wasn't Denmark at the negotiating table, it was Greenland wearing the Denmark hat. So does Denmark really do international relations? Sort of. As a string of communities dangled high in the Arctic, Greenland has high running costs. Almost everything from food and clothes to building materials and industrial equipment needs to be imported, and Greenland is hardly on the way to anywhere, at least until climate change opens up the Arctic. It has the lowest population density and the highest coastline per capita of anywhere in the world. It doesn't have rail or even roads between towns. Burdens of territory fall heavy on Greenland. As the financially responsible party, Denmark provides subsidies to overcome these problems. However, just because Greenland doesn't have its own income doesn't mean that it's not wealthy. It's just that all that wealth is locked up in the form of valuable minerals way underground, and as science and markets improve access to this wealth, those deposits will become commercially viable. Denmark has plans for the removal of those subsidies once the mineral revenue increases. This land, currently Greenland's big weakness, once fully exploited, will be its strength. So is Greenland really responsible financially? Well, for now at least. It can't be denied that Greenland is 100% fully dependent on outside help for defence. Denmark isn't the only military actor on the island, as the US and NATO have a base left over from World War II, just in case the Cold War. Iceland, a short hop away, doesn't have a standing military, but won the Cod Wars with the Coast Guard and good negotiation alone. There are plenty of independent countries without armies that often rely on larger states for protection. It's a bit of a stretch, but there is an asterisk in there somewhere. The name. Are you taking the piss? The thing that makes Greenland Danish isn't its reliance on anything that Denmark does or gives, it's that Greenland still accepts the Danish constitution. So Greenland can dance whatever dance it wants, but Denmark decides the dance floor. All of these exceptions make Greenland a difficult place to understand, and together with another factor, they explain Greenland's ridiculous size and colour on most world maps. A map maker makes more decisions than you'll ever realise. Ever since the ancient Greek mathematicians, we've had problems transforming between dimensional spaces. A 3D globe cannot be perfectly mapped onto a 2D plane without compromising on one or more of these points. A map maker will choose which points to compromise on based on the map's purpose. Every major online map provider has decided that just like in the Age of Discovery, Mercator projection preserves the most useful features for navigation. And Mercator causes northern latitudes to stretch, so on these maps Greenland is massive. Similarly, choices are made on a political map of borders. Do you show the real situation which can change from day to day, or do you follow what's official? And in that case, who do you listen to? Even my decisions when making maps are inconsistent, but don't mistake my aesthetic and storytelling choices for political statements. As for Greenland, the choice the map maker is faced with is always unique. The Faroe Islands are in a comparable situation politically, but on most world maps they're completely invisible because of their size. For some purposes Greenland is Denmark, no question. But for most matters, Greenland is completely separate. Showing Greenland on a map about independent states would be a lie, and integrating Greenland to Denmark often doesn't work either, and if you don't explicitly explain the choices, that can raise even more questions. Unless the map reader and the map maker have perfect knowledge about the status and the context of Greenland, the only way to be clear, consistent, and tell the truth is to keep Greenland grey. As for whether Greenland is a country, well, you can blame Scotland for that question. Scotland joined Great Britain voluntarily, whereas Greenland carved out control from the inside. Nowhere in the Danish constitution or either Act of Autonomy is Greenland described as a country. It's called a people and a distinct community. Any similarities with Scotland were arrived at from a different path. Scotland is a country for completely different reasons. So call Greenland a country, or a constituent country, or a land, or a people, or a community, or a self-governing territory, or a trifle, or a trio of polar bears sitting on each other's shoulders wearing a trench coat, you'll always find someone who has reasons to disagree. One more thing, if you like content like this and if 4 uploads a year is too infrequent, then please consider supporting this channel through Patreon. It's completely optional, but it's well appreciated. Thanks for watching.